Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. We love to go deep on really interesting subjects, and today is no exception. We're going to be talking about the Mayo Clinic's guide to a heart-healthy diet. We all want to take care of our tickers, and this is one way to really do it. So we're going to unpack this guide and see what we can learn, and hopefully give you some tips that you can actually use. No need to become a, total nutrition pro.
Yeah.
Just looking for those impactful things that you can actually implement in your daily life.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. It's a pretty substantial guide. It covers 8 key areas. So I think as we go through each one, it might be helpful if you're listening to think about your own eating habits and see if anything kind of sparks an idea for a change you might want to make.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
All right, so let's jump right in. I think the first thing that kind of popped out to me was portion control.
Mm.
It might seem obvious, but the guide emphasizes that portion sizes have become, well, huge over time, especially when we're eating out.
That's so true. Think about it. Restaurants, they often serve portions that are 2 or 3 times larger than what we actually need. And even at home, we might be using plates and bowls that are much larger than they were a few decades ago.
Yeah. You give me a giant plate of food, I'm going to eat it.
Yeah.
So what are some strategies that the guide recommends to get a handle on these portions?
Well, one of the things that I think is a really simple tip is to use smaller plates and bowls. It's a visual trick, but it can make a huge difference. Also, being mindful of the number of servings you're actually consuming. It's really easy to mindlessly go back for seconds without even realizing it.
I'm so guilty of that.
Yeah.
And the guide also has some really helpful visuals for estimating serving sizes, like using a deck of cards for meat or a fist for pasta.
Yeah, that's a good way to make it more concrete. So moving on to another key area, the guide focuses on fruits and vegetables.
Okay, so we all know fruits and veggies are good for us.
Mm.
But why are they particularly beneficial for heart health?
Well, they're packed with essential vitamins and minerals and fiber, which are all important for maintaining a healthy heart. And beyond that, they contain plant-based compounds that have actually been linked to a lower risk of heart disease.
So it's not just about eating more, but about choosing the right kinds of produce. Does the guide suggest any strategies for incorporating more fruits and veggies into our diets?
Well, one tip is to keep pre-cut fruits and vegetables readily available for snacking. That way, when you're feeling peckish, you're more likely to reach for something healthy. And when you're cooking, try to make fruits and veggies the star of the show, instead of just side dishes.
I love that idea. Now let's move on to something that might not be as glamorous, whole grains. Sometimes they get a bad rap for being bland, but I'm guessing the guide highlights their benefits for heart health.
Absolutely. While refined grains have been stripped of many nutrients, whole grains are packed with fiber, which, as we mentioned earlier, is essential for regulating blood pressure.
So what are some examples of whole grains that people might not be familiar with?
Well, beyond the usual brown rice and oatmeal, there are some really delicious and versatile options like farro, quinoa, and barley.
Those sound interesting. I'm going to have to try those. Okay, now let's talk about something maybe a bit more serious. Limiting unhealthy fats. Now, we all need some fat in our diets, but the guide emphasizes the importance of understanding the different types and how they affect our hearts.
Exactly. Saturated and trans fats are the ones we need to be particularly mindful of. These fats can raise what's called LDL cholesterol, which is the bad cholesterol that contributes to plaque buildup in arteries, and that increases the risk of heart disease.
So how can we avoid these unhealthy fats? Is it as simple as just cutting out all fat?
Well, not quite. It's more about making smarter choices. For example, trimming visible fat from meat, choosing lean protein sources, and opting for low-fat cooking methods can make a really big difference. Reading labels carefully is crucial too, especially since trans fats can lurk in unexpected places, particularly processed foods.
Oh yeah, those sneaky trans fats. Okay, well, I think this is a good place to take a little pause. When we come back, we're going to delve into some more of the tips and advice from the Mayo Clinic's Guide to Heart-Healthy Eating. So stay tuned.
And speaking of those sneaky things that lurk in unexpected places, let's talk about sodium. It's often the hidden culprit when it comes to heart health.
Right. It's not always as obvious as, a big pile of salt on your food. So why is sodium such a concern for our hearts?
Well, excessive sodium intake is directly linked to high blood pressure, which is a major risk factor for heart disease. When there's too much sodium in your bloodstream, it attracts water, increasing the volume of blood in your arteries. And this puts extra pressure on your heart and blood vessels, making them work harder. And over time, this can lead to a variety of problems, including heart attack and stroke.
Okay, so
Okay.
reducing sodium is clearly important. What are some actionable tips from the guide for doing that?
Well, cooking at home more often gives you much greater control over the amount of sodium in your food. Also, be sure to read labels carefully and choose reduced sodium options whenever possible. And remember that low sodium claims can be misleading, so always check the actual sodium content on the nutrition label.
Sounds like being a savvy label reader is a crucial skill for heart-healthy eating. Now let's switch gears a bit and talk about something that might not sound as exciting. Planning ahead. It might seem a bit mundane, but I have a feeling the guide emphasizes it for a reason.
Absolutely. Planning ahead doesn't have to be restrictive or complicated. It's simply about setting yourself up for success by having healthy options readily available when hunger strikes.
Was it more about being prepared than sticking to a rigid meal plan?
Exactly. The guide does suggest creating daily menus that incorporate a variety of foods from different food groups. But the key is to find a system that works for you and keeps things interesting. No one wants to eat the same salad every day.
No, they do not. Now let's talk about something I think everyone enjoys. Treats. A heart-healthy diet doesn't mean giving up all the good stuff.
Of course not. The guide emphasizes balance and moderation. It's perfectly fine to indulge in your favorite treats occasionally, as long as they don't become everyday habits.
That's reassuring. So it's not about deprivation, but about finding a sustainable balance that allows for enjoyment.
Precisely. The guide does recommend limiting added sugar, which is something to be mindful of. But overall, the message is that occasional treats are a part of a healthy and happy life.
Those are some really helpful insights. And hey, if you're enjoying this deep dive, make sure you like this episode and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating explorations into various topics. And don't forget to leave a comment below and tell us what resonates with you most.
We love hearing from our listeners and learning about what sparks their curiosity.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive into heart-healthy eating, let's kind of revisit the 8 key areas we've discussed.
Okay, so we started with portion control, emphasizing the importance of being mindful of how much we're eating, even when it comes to healthy foods. We then moved on to the power of fruits and vegetables, highlighting their wealth of nutrients and disease-fighting compounds.
We explored the benefits of whole grains, those fiber-rich powerhouses that help regulate blood pressure. And we discussed the importance of limiting unhealthy fats, particularly saturated and trans fats, which can contribute to heart disease.
We also talked about the hidden dangers of sodium and offered practical tips for reducing sodium intake. And we emphasized the value of planning ahead, not as a restrictive measure, but as a way to set ourselves up for success by having healthy options readily available.
Of course, we couldn't forget about treats. We highlighted the importance of balance and moderation, reassuring listeners that occasional indulgences are perfectly acceptable as part of a healthy lifestyle.
This deep dive has provided a glimpse into the key principles of heart-healthy eating, according to the Mayo Clinic. But there's always more to learn.
If you're interested in exploring this topic further, we've included a link to the full Mayo Clinic article in the description below. It's definitely worth a read for anyone who wants to delve deeper into the nuances of heart-healthy eating.
And as we wrap up, remember that small, sustainable changes can make a big difference in the long run. It's not about perfection, but about making conscious choices that support your heart health.
Yeah, it really is. It's all about progress, not perfection. And what really struck me about this guide is that it's not just about what you eat. It's also about your mindset and approach to food.
I think that's a great point. The guide really emphasizes the importance of enjoying your meals and finding pleasure in healthy eating. It's not about deprivation or guilt. It's about making choices that nourish your body and bring you joy.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important message for everyone listening. It's about finding that sustainable way of eating that supports both your physical and mental well-being.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to make all these changes overnight. Start with one small step, like incorporating more fruits and veggies into your meals, or maybe being more mindful of portion sizes.
And as you build those healthy habits, you'll start to see the positive impact on your overall health and well-being.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought. Think about your next grocery shopping trip. How can you use what we've discussed today to make heart-healthy choices? What small changes can you make that will add up to big benefits over time?
That's a great question to ponder. And remember, we're all on this journey together. So be kind to yourself, celebrate your successes, and keep learning and growing.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into heart-healthy eating. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.